Item on the agenda today is the interview for Dr. Chris Timmis. And I see Miss Dr. Timmis coming. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thanks for having me.
Thank you and welcome. And we will get started right away unless you have some questions before we get started.
Uh, you're in charge. I'm good.
Okay. Um, so if you could start by just telling us about a time when you had to make a difficult ethical decision in your leadership role. What was the situation? What did you do? And what was the outcome?
How much time do we have? So I've been a superintendent now. This is my 18th year. So I was 34 when I first started. I was in Adrian at the time, and we had some rough years. It was right at the beginning of the Great Recession. We had lost about 10,000 jobs in the district or in the community in a short span of time. We were we were broke. We had 143,000 in fund balance. I didn't even want to be the superintendent. I was basically told you were going to be. I'd only been there I was a high school principal for about 4 months when I found out. And what I found was we had to make really tough decisions and put the decisions of what is best for our kids and our community first. So throughout my career, I've had to fire friends. I've had to make really hard decisions, but they were the right ones for the kids. Recently, I've gotten to make a really great ethical decision. A few years back, in Dexter, we have the senior center was housed in one of our buildings. And we sold the building. We had it set up. It was $1 a year lease. We sold the building to a local theater because we only had 8 people working in it. And we set it up that as a district, we are a community school district. We're 84 square miles. We go through 8 municipalities, surround the city, but we really manage everything. So the seniors, we set it up with the Encore Theater that bought it that we had to support our seniors. So we wrote into the agreement that they had to let them stay for $1 a year for 5 years and that we would find them a home. So in the process, we started working on, we were doing some bond construction. We started to try to build some spaces, but it's a pretty fine line for a school district to use bond money for a senior center. So we worked and we tried to pass a recreation millage to build a senior center. It went down in flames. And that was right during the pandemic. So we sat back and we went, okay, we're committed. We have to take care of our community and the seniors need a home. So we worked really hard with legislators and community groups and members and ended up just Saturday, we did a ribbon cutting. We received a $10 million total. It was an $8.5 million state appropriation, $850,000 federal appropriation, and some county money. And we purchased a fitness center, the Dexter Wellness Center, that was going out of business. And we built a 9,000 square foot senior center. And as a school district, we're just committed to kids and to our community. And what we know is that if our community is not a favorable place to be able to raise kids, that it hurts the entire community. So ethically, in working, you've been on a school board for a long time. I had to work with our school board. They're going, why are we building a senior center? Because we're the only entity that can do it. It's the ethical and moral thing to do. It's not taken out of our resources. It was volunteer time on my part to make it happen. But I've gone through the good and the bad ethical decisions. That's a really good one. And it's great to see them. You should come visit. It's unbelievable. And it was funded through just collaboration and doing the right thing for the community.
Thank you so much.
What is your vision for public education in Michigan over the next 5 years? And how would you ensure measurable improvement in student outcomes statewide?
Okay. So one of my strengths is, as a leader, I am a true transformational leader. I have a vision of what the future of education will look like, and I have actually had a proven track record of making that vision a reality. So what I see happening in the next 5 years is, first, we need to be able to get one compelling vision across the state of what education will look like and what's important. So our current system was designed over a century ago, and it was designed to sort and select kids. and it does a great job of it. Some kids are successful, and we sort others right out of the system. As a state, we have a 60% four-year graduation rate for kids with IEPs. We are failing way too many kids. And part of it is systems will do exactly what they're designed to do. So what I envision over the next 5 years is, first, 2 major goals. Every kid graduates on time, and they graduate on time with the skills and the knowledge to be successful as healthy and happy adults. And the second one is we focus on student engagement. We keep trying to work strategy after strategy and these little incremental moves. What happens, so when I was in Adrian, we had a 66% graduation rate. When I left, we had a 91%. We were ranked during the Race to the Top era at the 3.7th percentile in the state, and when I left, we were at the 91st. I got to Dexter, we had a 54% four-year graduation rate for students with IEPs. It's now 93%. We have 2 students didn't finish on time, and we'll get them done. They just needed an extra year or 2. We have a 99% four-year graduation rate. Yet as a state, we have last year alone, 18% of our kids not graduating on time, because we keep trying to implement things in first, second, third, fourth grade, and we forget about the rest of them. And if you set a standard that says every kid graduates on time, and the second one is, instead of focusing on seat time, we maximize student engagement. So the way you increase student achievement is, if you have this much time to work with, you have to have this much time with students engaged in and outside the classroom. When you really study what happens, it's usually this much time to work with and about this much time kids are engaged. So what I see happening is the merger of the technology that's available, creating a competency-based system that personalizes learning for kids, having options for kids, but focusing laser-like on every kid graduates on time, and we're gonna measure student engagement and staff engagement. Because if the kids are engaged in and out of outside of the school, and the staff's engaged in and outside of the school, our kids will be successful. And that we have the technology available now to do things like AI. I was a founding member of a group called the Futures Institute. So in 2018 and 19, we were meeting to look at the impact of AI on education and on policy. And nobody even heard what was going on with AI at the time. And now in Dexter, we've created our own large learning, or LLM. So we have our own large language model that protects kids' data. It's locally hosted. It does not allow the data to go outside. We can monitor it, but it provides us an opportunity to teach kids how to use it and to maximize technology. When I look at the future of education, I see local school districts laser-like focused on students graduating on time and on engagement, creating, and I've analyzed it for about 10 years, working with people all over the country. We have one policy change we need to make. We need to change the word seat time in the school code to engagement time. Even the Carnegie Institute and the Carnegie Foundation, who created the Carnegie unit that equates to what we do now for seat time, has come out saying it has run its course. It is time to move to looking at what are the transferable skills that kids can develop, and how do we teach them their skills. So I picture that focus, that laser-like focus, and then using schools as a hub. So we create P14 or P16 school districts. And it doesn't mean they're all in the district, but they're collaborations where kids can document transferable skills that employers want and that they need to be successful. Where we follow their communication, collaboration, creative problem-solving skills, and we actually measure that. So years ago in Dexter, we were involved in a national pilot that was foundation funded. It was called Summit Learning. And what it did is it allowed us to kind of analyze and work through on a kind of the cutting edge of what schools could look like. It was a competency-based system that was completely personalized for kids. And we offered parents options. We offered pathways. If they wanted that option, they could take it. If they wanted a more traditional option, they could choose that. We have to be able to allow parents and kids choice. But for those that want a different model, we need to offer a model. And what we found in that model is when we started teaching transferable skills, and I remember Brian Whiston came down and visited right after the top 10 and 10 was released, and he comes down and he's like, "You're already there." And then we had Mike Flanagan came down and visit once. He's like, "Oh, this is unbelievable." So what we had created was we counted grades for a kid. 70% of their grade was on their development of the competencies. 30% was on content. In the end, because we didn't focus on content, we were getting 240% reading and math growth per year. We were off the charts, but we weren't even teaching reading and math. So when I look at the future of schools is in school districts is we need to have laser-like focus on graduation on time, laser-like focus on student engagement, and then we have to redefine what it means for a graduate. Have a portrait of a graduate. The MDE has one on the website. I was on the committee that helped develop it back, it was during the pandemic, if I remember right. And those are the skills we need to measure because those are the skills that kids need. We asked our whole community years ago, I think it was 2017, what are the characteristics, knowledge, and skills our kids need to be successful? Very few of them said content knowledge. It was one of them, but what they said is they need their kids to have financial literacy, they need to have information literacy, they need to be kind and empathetic, they need to be able to communicate. That's what we need to do for the future of schools. The technology is available. We just need to unbundle our rigid model and get laser-like focused.
The next question is about deep educational and systems experience. How has your experience as an educator informed your approach to system-level leadership? Share an example where your teaching or educational leadership experience influenced a district or state policy.
All right, so been a superintendent now my 18th year. My first district, we had to facilitate a major turnaround during the Race to the Top era, during the Great Recession. Some of the laws that were written at that time so imagine this, I'm 34 years old. I think I was 35 at that time. I think I had a year under my belt. We get a call that we're invited to a meeting, not really invited, we're told to be at a meeting at a golf course up here in Lansing. And we get there and they say, okay, you have 4 options. Your high school's on the list and the middle school is 1 school away. You can either shut the school down, you can turn it into a charter school, you can fire half the staff, including the principal, or you can do a transformation. So we chose transformation because we had hope. So in that process, we worked statewide with districts to be able to do the turnaround and the transformation. And Adrian we were studied nationally on that turnaround. I've then taken it in Dexter, and this is where I'll get to the systems part. In Dexter, when I was recruited as a sole candidate, which is I would never wish that upon my worst enemy. And I was recruited to turn a good district into a great district. So what we did when I was there is we started to partner with multiple entities, and I started to learn the system and learn it in a different setting. So throughout my career, I've been a parapro, I've been a teacher, a coach, a curriculum director, a high school principal, and a superintendent. And I'm gonna give you 2 examples, concrete examples of systems leadership. So the first one is we have a para-to-teacher program in Washtenaw County. That program started when I was in Adrian. I was working with Siena Heights University on trying to create a program through work study funding. We had already been doing that with kids in our alternative ed on how to get tutoring in math and science from college students. We're on the way to getting it set up for the para-to-teacher program when I moved to Washtenaw County and went to Dexter. So I had met with the dean of the School of Ed at Eastern, and he loved the idea. How do we get our paras who are working with our kids that need us the most, how do we get them the training and the help in the certification so they can be special education teachers? And this was like 2014-ish. And then I met with the special ed department. They couldn't do it at the time, went down in flames, and I'm kind of tenacious. So I met with the president, ended up with the dean again, ended up again. Then I got smarter. Then I worked with Washtenaw ISD, and they started setting it up. And now we have over 100 graduates that went through the para-to-teacher program that are now certified. And that grew into, when you look at Talent Together started with myself and 4 others sitting in a room, working on what are the laws and policies that would allow us an alternative route to certification that we could do through school districts in partnership with higher ed. Then it took off and everybody else took it on. I'm also the president of a group called the Future Learning Council. So in 2017, a group of us were working on competency-based ed, and we would meet, there's about 12 of us, and whoever bought lunch would host. And we were kind of living through it together, what's working, what's not. It was more of a support group at that time. Once the pandemic started, we'd get called from everyone around the state going, what are you guys doing? What are you doing? So we decided to formalize. And in 2021, we became a formalized 501c3. And the Future Learning Council is a collection of over 70 school districts, charter schools, and ISDs. There's 14 ISDs that are members. We meet monthly with over 100 physical and virtual attendees at every meeting. On the day before the training, when we bring in the best trainers and the best minds in the country, we train the ISDs so they can support their locals. We then train the locals who bring entire teams of teachers, principals, superintendents, et cetera, and we put the doers in the room, and the expectation is you can be here, but you're gonna go do. And out of that work, we have had districts that are members that have created entire different teacher staffing models. If you go look at what Concord's doing down in Jackson County, it's unbelievable. You go to Alcona in northern Michigan, unbelievable work. We have a coalition of the willing that are willing to do the work to change our schools, and we've put it together. So when you talk about systems leadership, I have a deep understanding of systems leadership, and I'm doing it on a volunteer basis. I would love to do it sitting with all of you.
Thank you.
I think I'm hearing my voice. Describe a specific initiative you've led that addressed educational inequities or closed opportunity gaps, and what data or feedback, thank you, informed your approach, and what were the results?
So the one I'm most proud of, well, there's two. So when I was in Adrian, we had about 65% of our kids on free and reduced lunch, about 40% of our students were students of color, large English language learner population. And we had at one point, when I first started, I think I was a high school principal, it was my first year, and I had analyzed that not a single Hispanic male had passed the MEP test in our entire district. And I reached out to the ISD and couldn't really get it. It was a hard time. And then started analyzing that our African American students, especially when they got to 5th and 6th grade, were really struggling. So we started to put systems in place, and we focused laser-like on graduating on time and on student engagement. And at one point, our 5th and 6th grade African American students were outperforming our white students, which was great. But it didn't solve the deeper problem. And that's when we started to really analyze how we look at special ed graduation rates. Because across this state, and I just say it again, 60% of our kids with an IEP graduated on time. And what happens is collectively, and this is the story I tell everybody that works with me, we tell kids and parents when they're 8, 9, or 10 years old, we call them into a meeting, and we say, we're gonna give you this individualized education plan. And at that time, we sell them hope. And we give them more resources, et cetera. But what we've actually done is statistically made it less likely for them to ever finish. So in Dexter, when I first started, we had a 54% four-year special education student graduation rate. And we just started putting systems in place. Graduation coaches, which is a model out of communities and schools in Atlanta. We started putting systems in place on, if you've ever read Malcolm Gladwell, Tipping Point, one of the best theories is the law of the few. So what you'll find is kids, when they are not passing classes, it's not that they're failing all the classes. It's a handful of classes that are holding them up. And if you laser-like focus on that data, you know exactly where to leverage. And by bringing up our four-year special education graduation rate we got it as high as like 94 or 95%. By bringing that up, we brought the whole rate up to 99, and we get every kid done on time. And I've worked with districts all over the state on this model. I put them in touch with, there's a guy that does training for districts and does coaching of graduation coaches that I put him in touch with that worked with me early on as we developed the model. And nobody's trying to make money off it. I just want kids to finish on time and to have a future. So when you talk about initiative, that's one of my favorites and the most important. Another one was how we raised the Adrian test scores for the 5th and 6th graders is we had worked with the Boys and Girls Club of Lenawee, who was housed in a 2-classroom setting across the street from our 5th and 6th grade building in an old Catholic school. They had about 50 to 70 students every day that would go there after school. So we worked with them and we filled in a pool at the 5th and 6th grade building. We raised $1 million of privately funded dollars. We filled the pool in. We turned it into the Boys and Girls Club of Lenawee. It's still open. And we gave the kids full access to the gym at night. We worked with Meyer and put in a Wii Fitness room. We put in a computer lab that had our intervention software in it. And then we assigned staff in the evening to go work with the kids on homework help. And we ended up at the point where I left Adrian and went to Dexter, we had 170 kids a day going to the Boys and Girls Club of Lenawee from 3 o'clock till 8 o'clock every night. And from 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock in the morning in the summer till 4 o'clock in the afternoon for $3 a year of membership fee. Everything else was privately raised. We worked with Siena Heights to get a full scholarship for a kid every year out of there. And what it did was it kept kids engaged outside the classroom, but we were able to embed work in the classroom, and that's how we got our kids to outperform everyone else.
Thanks. Follow-up?
Tom,
One quick question on foster care. We currently have a system where transcripts often don't follow the students as they're going from home to home, and also the parental authority of the biological parent to know what's going on with the students doesn't follow as well. So if you were selected, it may just take a half of an FTE of an ombudsman or, for foster care. If this board asked you and passed a resolution or, the majority wanted you to address this issue, do you think you could do that in a timely fashion?
It's a really complicated problem. There's nothing I don't think I can do as far as running schools and helping kids. It's trying to find the right resources and how you get the data systems right to be able to really make it happen with any level of fidelity, but it seems doable. We have data following right now. The data reports that are rolling in, seems like we should be able to track students. The one problem we have is, and it's not a problem that can't be overcome,
Right.
is different learning management systems and student information systems that the data stored. I still remember when I was and this has been a problem that's gone on for a long time. Back with the paper records, when I taught in Southgate, I had a student from eCourse once that we didn't get her records until March. She told us she was supposed to be in 9th grade. Turns out she was supposed to be in 8th grade. Parents told us we just did the right thing for the kid. We couldn't get records. And we just take care of kids. But in the field, everyone wants to help kids. There's probably a way. Off the top of my head, I don't know how, because there's data systems and loops that aren't closed that I don't truly understand. But really, there's way to do it, and it would fit into where I see the future and how to actually leverage change. And what I've seen through my experience on how to increase student achievement is every kid has to graduate on time. So first, you got to know where they've been and and what they need.
Okay, thank you.
So I got the next question, and in addition to that, and it takes more research, the legislation that was recently passed, the kids have to be enrolled in school within 5 days of a placement. So,
Yeah.
and then hopefully that stuff starts to pick up with the stuff passing. I know what it is, what we're trying to get to. Could you please share with us a time you had to respond to a community or a group that felt unheard or marginalized, and how did you approach that issue or concern, and what did you learn from it? What was your takeaway?
I've been a superintendent 18 years. This happens a lot. Trying to think of a good example. I can tell you one that I self-imposed it almost. So I started in Dexter in 2013, and Ann Arbor had tried to consolidate with Whitmore Lake, and Whitmore Lake was struggling. I mean, their size, Whitmore Lake, they have great leadership, and they're incredibly creative, and they do an incredible job with kids. And at the time, we had financial issues going still, and there was a lot going on. So we got talked into trying to annex Whitmore Lake. So I found myself in several conversations. I had been there for about 6 months, maybe a year, and there's signs all through town, no annexation without representation, I think is what it said. They were great signs. And what I have found is you just have the conversation. So whenever, and this is how I've operated forever, whenever there are people that are not being heard and they need to be heard, I'll call a meeting. I call forums all the time, like tomorrow night, 7:00 here, let's talk. And I remember standing in the gym and I took a beating, but I understood their concerns. And it's hard in an interview to say you're a good listener because you're in a position you got to talk the whole time. But I listen, and what I actually work with our administrators on all the time is there's some theories out there. And the one I love is the fundamental state of leadership. And when you're in the fundamental state of leadership, you are not drowning out noise, you're listening for patterns. And you're listening for what are the root causes you're trying to address. So I remember standing there, and we had like 8 or 9 forums where it was packed and people were mad. And I'm the new guy. And we would just have honest conversations. And you could actually flush out what the root causes are. And generally what I find with parents, and I grew up downriver. I worked in Oakland County at a tech center. I worked in airport schools down in Monroe County as a curriculum director. I taught downriver for years, for about 8 years in Southgate. I worked in Adrian, which is a really diverse, unique community. And then I went to Dexter, which is very affluent in a unique way. And what I found is everywhere I've been, all parents want is they want their kids to be happy. They want them to be healthy, and they want them to be successful. And they're looking to you to help make that happen. So I remember through the annexation, I took a beating. But out of that, we ended up finding some good moves for the future to help us really start to innovate and support schools. And then as a county, we passed a countywide special ed millage. I honestly think some of these things helped to have that kind of conversation going, okay, we have neighbors that are struggling. How do we help them? And the answer wasn't bring them on board. The answer was, okay, let's collectively go figure out another way. And we passed a county special ed millage. We've done a bunch of different things collaboratively. And our districts they're doing a really great job for kids. And I still look back, I took a beating, but they were mad for a good reason. They wanted their schools, they wanted their kids to be successful, and they didn't want us to be distracted, but we also had to make sure to take care of our neighbors. I got more if you want me to go another one. Okay. I've been doing this a long time. I got a million examples.
Next one. Describe a situation where your communication style helped resolve a conflict or build trust across a diverse group of stakeholders.
I talked about annexation. Okay. So early on, when I was probably 35. It was that same year. So I had a really rough year in my first 2 years. It was like one never-ending year as a superintendent. So we had, in Adrian, we had $143,000 in fund balance on a $40 million annual budget. That was the year that we took and a year later, we took a $470 cut. That was right in that window. We were bleeding kids. Bridge Magazine, I think it was Bridge, released an article. It was called Michigan's Failing 40, the worst school districts in Michigan. And started with A, we were first. So we had a community that was really, really frustrated. We were cutting before I got there. We were doing all kinds of really tough work. And then I inherit this and stepped in and had to take on the leadership. And what would happen is we had to make tough decisions. So we privatized our transportation. We sold the entire fleet for $65,000. That was all the buses were worth. We could not afford to get new buses. We were running buses that were over 20 years old. And as we were going through that process, we had 200 people at the meetings. We had cameras from the Detroit news stations. We had cameras from the Toledo news stations. Down in Adrian, you have 2 radio stations and a daily newspaper. And we're in these meetings, and I lived there. I had lived there for quite a while. And what we found is my communication style, we were able to navigate through it. And the bus drivers ended up getting hired by the next vendor. And I'm not a proponent of privatization, but we didn't have a choice. They don't make yellow Bondo anymore. You can't make a bus pass inspection with putting makeup on it. We didn't have buses, and we had to find a way. And in the end, the community and even our groups, they were good. It was honest conversations. I listen, and then I usually filter back what I think I've heard, and I am really to the point. I'm empathetic, yet strong. And what I find is that after you've demonstrated it and you follow through, people trust your decisions, even if it is the least popular thing you could be doing. And sometimes in leadership, you don't have a choice. And I remember those meetings. They were awful. And I remember the one-on-one meetings with every driver going, no, we want you to come back. We can't buy buses. We don't have any money. I mean, we were so broke. We once sold a plow on the front lawn of the school, an old plow with a truck to try to buy some books. We had to buy band uniforms I got to think how we did that. We sold something to buy band uniforms because they were 25 years old. I mean, we had challenges, but everybody was still trusting because I was honest and laid out the problem, listened to their concerns, laid out the problem, and laid out potential solutions and involved them in the potential solution. And we came up with other solutions for other areas of the district, and it was great. That didn't involve closing buildings and cutting off programs for kids. We expanded programs for kids and had tremendous results because of it. So my style, I am exactly who you see right now. I just call it how I see it, but I listen.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I'm up to bat next here. This next question is about the political nature of the position of state superintendent. Michigan's political landscape is complex. Tell us about a time when you advanced an educational policy or initiative in a politically sensitive context. How did you build support while staying focused on students? Who was the opposition, and how did you work with them?
Oh, again, 18 years. What I find is I am truly politically independent. I can work with anybody. I'm very clear that I care about kids. And what I find is Democrats and Republicans care about kids. We all have different solutions for it, but we all care that kids are successful. We may have different models that would work or might work, but when you focus on kids. So throughout my career, I remember what I have found is I have done my best work when I'm having meetings and relationships, not at the table. It comes down to those relationships that they can trust you. So that when you make a call and you say, all right, if you pass this piece of legislation, there are these two words that are going to cause this other problem, that you have the relationship where you're not calling out of the blue. So when I worked in Adrian, at the time we had mostly Republican representatives. In Dexter, we've had a mix, and now all Democratic representatives. And I have found that I've always been able to work with everyone. So right now I'm working on funding for the Future Learning Council. It was in the budget a couple of years ago and then disappeared in the final step. But it really comes out of those conversations. And I've been involved in so many legislative pieces. I mean, all the way back to when the healthcare changes happened with hard caps, to prohibited subjects, to undoing prohibited subjects, to there's language on consolidation that years ago when we were talking Whitmore Lake that came about. I've been involved. I have not always had to go out front to do it, but I generally am in the conversations quietly. And that's where you get it done. You get it done in the relationships.
Very good, thank you.
Can I have a short follow-up? Very short.
Mhm.
Just make this a real short question. If school districts or schools or in the classroom, a child, let's say Joey, is being called Susie or going to the girls' bathroom or locker room, do you think the parents of Joey should be aware of that?
So let me tell you how we handle it. and been doing this a lot, where we built gender-neutral restrooms in elementary school when we redid the restrooms, because the only place a kid ever saw a urinal was in a school when they were 5. So we built private little bathrooms with a toilet and a door that shuts and sinks in the hallway so the kids quit throwing water on each other. What we do is we work immediately with the student on how we're gonna have that conversation with the parents. And then we meet with the parents and we have conversations. I have had hundreds of these conversations throughout my career. I have had conversations, there are kids in every school I've ever worked at that only myself and the parents know the birth identity of that child. We care about kids. And when you focus on every kid graduates on time and every kid is fully engaged, you have to work with the parents and you have to have the really honest, hard conversations. I have had times where it was really bad, where the parents were, for good reason, struggling. But you have to be the support and help the family work through so they can support their kid, whatever they decide. And I'll never change that. You always have to work with the families, you have to work with the kids. And you have to embrace a kid for who he or she is. Whoever the kid is, it's our job to make sure they graduate on time and that they love school. That's our job.
Thank you. I have the next question. Collaborative relationship building is the question area. Give an example of how you built and sustained a successful partnership with a group, unions, families, tribal nations, legislators, for example, and what evidence can you share that made it successful?
Again, 18 years. I'm trying to figure. Can you read that one more time? 'Cause
Yeah,
I got about
give an
7
example of
bouncing.
how you built and sustained a successful partnership with a stakeholder group like unions, families, tribal nations, legislators, and what evidence can you share that made it successful?
So I've done a lot of intergovernmental. I've done colleges, community colleges, universities, and schools. Worked with other districts. We have exchanges I've set up with other countries with schools. One of I would say that Boys and Girls Club example was one of the more unique. When we set that up, we allowed other districts to bus kids into our own district to drop them off. And we had the community would run fundraisers to be able, they did the greatest fundraiser ever. It's called the Blue Jean Ball. It's awesome. You get all the right people there and they get to wear jeans for a fundraiser, which is kind of unheard of. And what happened was they still serve kids from all over the county, but then satellite sites started to set up in other districts. I think of that one. We started some fundraising I've worked with foundations over the years, like in Adrian, we raised about $3 million to the Ed Foundation, working with private donors and private community members to fund projects they cared about. In Dexter, we set up, it was E4DS it was called. We already had an Ed Foundation, but we set up a way to fundraise to be able to create 1-week excursions for kids that went over to Eastern Michigan, and we set up a partnership with them. Once collaborated, the FLC is a great example of a collaboration. I mean, we have 70 school districts that are committed. We have a multiple year plan on how to improve our schools and are pretty close to funding both either legislative or private donations. And that is now 4 years in and we keep growing. And it's changing school districts and what happens in other districts. It's changing the way we do school. Trying to think of a community group. I've done them. I just got to remember what they are. I'm dating myself back. I'm trying to remember the ones I've done. You're hitting me with a tough one. I think that's what I got for now, but I know I've done it.
Okay, thank you.
Well, I have the next question around resilient and courageous, being resilient and courageous. And the question is, describe a situation where you face significant resistance or criticism from an important stakeholder group. How did you handle it and what principles guided your actions?
So when we did put in place Summit Learning in 2016, we had put that in place in 6th grade and then in 7th and 8th. And what Summit Learning was it was partnered with it was funded by the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. It was heavy in data behind the scenes and sign-offs and data agreements that parents had to agree to, and we're right outside Ann Arbor, so our parents know those agreements. We had, what had prompted it is we were trying to figure a way to personalize education for kids. And we had talked to some of the national leaders, and we said, okay, when we calculate this, in order for an elementary teacher to personalize education for kids, it's gonna take a 28-hour day. And that's just not gonna happen. So we find this partnership. I think we had 2 of the first 120 schools in the country that were in the Summit Learning Program. So it's brand new. And there was a district in the Missouri maybe, that did a terrible implementation. So it was in the news that this was this awful program, et cetera. And we had taken a group of parents that were begging and pleading for personalizing for either their kids that were struggling or for their kids that they felt were bored in school. And what we decided to do after working with the families was to set up pathways so parents had choices. And we set it up, and it eventually evolved into we had meeting after meeting, and like we had these agreements they had to sign so that kids could participate, because there was a learning management system that it would track what the kids were doing. And we had to work with Summit because it was a pilot to make it so that the parents could see everything the kid was doing. And once we set that up and we were able to work with the families and build choices and work with staff to build choices, we ended up evolving into a kind of a process that our kids in K2 would do a lot of genius hours and a lot of maker spaces, et cetera. 3rd and 4th, we became great at place-based learning. 5th and 6th, the kids then would choose between Summit or Pinnacle. So if they were gonna do this more personalized path, or they were gonna do this more traditional path, which still didn't look very traditional. And then in 7th and 8th grade, they could choose between 3 options. They could keep going with Summit, they can go with Pinnacle, or they could pick a hybrid. And one of the hardest things was trying to work with families to go, okay, you're no longer in English, you're in humanities. English and social studies is embedded together. You're no longer in math or science, you're in STEM. It's a block of time. And we're not giving tests. We give a pre and a post, and you move on at your pace. If your kid wants to work on math for the next 6 months, we're gonna get him through as much math as he wants to do. But we're gonna also make sure they do the rest, but it might be a challenging time. So we work through a lot of emotion. And when it first started, the biggest irony, it was Chan Zuckerberg Initiative funded, and the Facebook groups were beating us up. And we were having meetings, and we're meeting with parents, and what we did is we said it's an opt-in. You want in, you can come in. If you don't, we have this other option. And at that point, we called it traditional, so it was really bad, because nobody wanted traditional either. So we worked through a lot of feelings, worried about the future of their kids in a experimental pilot program, and we had to assure our parents that we are not experimenting on your kids. We have our best teachers stepped up and said, we want to do this. And we have great teachers everywhere. But they all stepped up saying they wanted to do it, and we let that relationship work itself through. And it was patience, and it was listening, and it was modifying. And we, like at one point, our middle school tried to do the whole building, and that went over bad. And we stepped back and said, pathways, let's do options. Give people choices. Americans like choice, especially for their own children.
Thank you.
The state of Michigan legislature has enacted a multifaceted literacy law, which is meant to directly assist children, particularly those in pre-K through 3rd grade, with improving their literacy skills. Please share with us your impression and knowledge of these bills. And as state superintendent, how would you lead the department, ISDs, RESAs, and local districts in implementing and monitoring the effects of these laws? Additionally, could you tell us what part, if any, you played in informing or providing support for these laws prior to their enactment?
Okay. This has been brewing for quite a while, as you know. There's different models around the country. There was the 3rd grade bill. There have been other iterations. As a local district, we were on March, what day did we shut down for COVID? March 13th?
Yeah.
16th? Okay. Okay, so on that Thursday night, everybody shut down. That Friday, we had science of reading training for all of our elementary teachers because they were all in. And we had already purchased resources and we were already on the front end. We had abandoned all the Lucy Calkins work and we were already moving there. We looked with our peers and we've tried to do now what we see. And one of the challenges when you're ahead of the game, you then have legislation that passes that actually might pull you back. So we've been dancing through and understanding. So at this point, we have about almost every one of our elementary classroom teachers is either letters trained or in process. And we already had a lot that were trained. We've incentivized it, et cetera. Here's the challenge with the implementation of the laws is in no world would we go and take two 14-year-old boys, one who is 6'2" and 200 and something pounds, and put him in a weight room and let him bench press whatever he could lift. And then take another 14-year-old boy and put him in a weight room and the kid is 5'1" and 100 pounds and make him lift the same amount of weight. But we do that with kids' brains. And the brain's just a muscle. So that's where focusing on how do you get every kid to graduate on time? Because you have to make the rest of the system aligned to make that happen. So reading has to be both scientific, but about engaging kids so they continue to enjoy school and so that they get what they need when they need it. And we may not get everyone where we need them to be at second, third, or fourth grade, but we'll get them there eventually. And honestly, in Dexter, our third grade reading scores are okay. Our 7th and 8th grade scores are the best in the state, and our high school scores are off the charts because we let kids develop. So what I would do is make sure that we really push every kid graduates on time and we're maximizing engagement. And then we let all of the strategy work through the ISDs and different support systems fall in place. And to be honest, if we could ever move to a competency-based system, it all takes care of itself. And we end up having kids learn things at their pace, and they grow at their pace, and they have agency over their learning. And what I would do is set up a series of pilots around the state where we could move to a competency-based model that would fit the laws, give them the resources, and then meanwhile work with the ISDs on keeping the rest of the system continuing to move for kids forward, but measuring, are the kids engaged and are they graduating on time? And take the graduation data a step further. There are schools in this state that kids leave so far behind on credit and they end up at another school and that school takes the hit on the graduation rate. Develop a system. We have the data systems flying all over that we know where those schools are and we start addressing that too. Because you change a system, the first thing, the number one rule in organizational design and change is if you want to change a behavior, you have to first redefine the task. And if you redefine that task, that kids are engaged and they graduate on time, everything starts to fall in place. And you make those behaviors change with clear expectations and opportunities for support. So as a department, it's the opportunities for support and the clear expectations that are achievable, and they're not just filling out a form. They're really about culture and how you shift a culture by changing and redefining the task.
I typically have a follow-up question, but I want to make sure that I can ask the special education question, so I'll defer and we'll keep
Okay,
moving.
we can come back if, okay. Thank you, Nikki.
This next question is about being authentic, humble, and trustworthy. Leadership often involves acknowledging mistakes. Share an instance where you changed your mind based on new information or feedback. How did you communicate the change and what did you learn?
I preach to our staff that they have the freedom to, as long as we're trying to graduate kids on time and keep them engaged, to do whatever they want that they think will work with kids. And I model it all the time. And there were years ago, I actually did this thing. I tried outside of education, there's a way of doing visioning that you write a story. It's more the Zingerman style. And I write the story, I go through it with all the staff, we start putting things in place. And what happened was through that story, we found like we were hammering on academics and we were like at one point, and I used the same models we had created when I was in Adrian, and we had brought up the height or the buildings were like at the 98th percentile, the 97th percentile, the 95th percentile. And our kids, the board set a goal for me to increase the number of kids in AP and IB. And our kids mentally were struggling. We had pushed them too far. And I had to come out and tell the staff, you know what? We were pushing, we were wrong. We need to figure out another option. And we have since moved to a block schedule, built in a bunch of different models so they get experiences, et cetera, and kind of laid off, and we still have the same achievement. But had to step up, and I remember standing on the stage. I took the job in Dexter as a sole candidate because of my ability to transform a school district. And I started on August 19th, that's tomorrow. And the next week we had opening day, and I stand on the stage and I tell them I've been there 4 days, and the process of being a sole candidate is really hard. Like anybody, you're not comparing anybody, so they're just finding every fault they can find on you. So I stand on stage and I tell the staff, I'm like, okay, the organization, I made them do this thing, stand up, close your eyes, point north, and they're pointing all over the place. They open their eyes to see where they're pointing. And I tell them, organizations that are serving every kid, everybody's going in the same direction. And we're gonna figure out where north is. And then I lay out, I said, we will be the best school district in the state and country. That's our goal. And then I had a few years later go, hold on. We're gonna be the best school district at graduating kids on time, and I'm making sure they're engaged. The test scores will take care of themselves. And we're not gonna go focus on the scores. We're just gonna teach kids, and we're gonna make sure they love being here. And it's a humbling moment. I think I recorded a video to send it out. I look ridiculous on a video. It was before we have good technology. Might have been a flip phone, or I don't know.
Thank you.
How have you integrated the arts, mental health supports, or social emotional learning into the educational experience? And how do you define success beyond test scores?
I talked about that a little bit. When I was in Adrian, we raised $2 million to endow a fine arts director, permanently endow it. We worked with a family that would give us $25,000 to $50,000 a year to set up arts camps over the summer where any kid could participate. And what we would do is we would have the students some students would direct the play, some would act in the play, some would build the sets, others would write the music. It was all self-driven. We'd get 50 to 100 kids. I'm a big believer in the arts, but even bigger on how do you engage kids in their learning? And what we often do in schools is we try to focus on only in the school time. So we have the 180 days, 1,098 hours, and we try to do everything there. We have in Dexter, and I talked about Adrian with the funding and building the endowment to keep a fine arts director. So the program, we would double staff our middle school plays. We double book it. We'd put 120 kids in the first set, and then another 120 in the second one. And we would do this from 5th grade up. In Dexter, we have 150 kids in our drama club. We have almost 200 in the band. We have a donor that pays for art teachers to go get trained anonymously. We have built a model where it's all about engagement, and I don't try to separate the arts from athletics, robotics, other activities. Our job is to make sure kids are engaged both inside and outside the school day. And what we've done and what we found with the mental health work, we did a community book study years ago where we brought in an author. It was about adolescent mental health. And we talked about how we're stressing our kids out. We gave out 200 or 300 books across the community for parents. We'd put 400 to 500 in our theater to have the conversations. And we talked about how we need our kids to be engaged in other activities so they can form those social groups and not be isolated. So in terms of supporting arts and mental health and defining success, it's how our kids are engaged. And we track how many of our high school kids are in something, how many of our middle school kids are in something. And as a district, and this is just a great example, we are a really unique setup. We run a preschool, which I had a building donated for $1 when I first started. And we run a 150 to 200 student preschool right on, we're all one campus. We serve 6-week-old babies. We give our staff a 20% discount. We run a K-12 program. We have an early middle college of our own. We participate in the county one at Early College Alliance. We have an IB program. We own a fitness center. We own a senior center. And then we have the community ed department. And through community education, we run the recreation department. We have all the fields. We do it for 84 square miles. And we have kids that are able to participate in camp starting when they're little. During the pandemic, when we received funds for extended school year, we let every kid enroll over the summer in something. And we put them in camps, we put them in activities, and what we found is that the measure of a kid's success is how well they're engaged and love school. And it doesn't have to be just the arts. And as we've gotten kids more and more engaged, it ends up solving so many other problems because they have the social networks and they find something they truly love. They're just trying to figure out who they are, and you got to give them opportunities to figure out who they are.
Thanks.
If selected for this opportunity where you're not the sole candidate,
Fine if that happens next week. But no,
yeah,
just kidding.
you would serve in a dual role as the state superintendent and the board chair. How will you ensure all members' voices are heard and that they are involved in key decisions when possible? Part 2 of that is, can you share a few examples where you successfully managed conflicts between 2 board members and or yourself and a board member?
So I've been a superintendent 18 years. I don't have to chair the meetings. However, I am the chair of the Huron Valley Ambulance Board. So I've served in that role, and I'm the president of the Future Learning Council. I've done a lot of these things. Over the 18 years, you will get times there are conflicts between board members, between groups of board members, between myself and board members, et cetera. And it still comes down to relationships and understanding each other. And there are strategies that can be used. And I don't like sharing all my bag of tricks, but I'll tell you one. So, in positive psychology, there is a strategy that says you take and you have a group work through some kind of positive affirmation. So you form these relationships, and then you make even the people that are not getting along have to point out when they've seen each other at their best. Because we've all seen each other, even when you're not getting along with someone, when we're doing good work. And you got to hear it from others because it's hard because you keep thinking, they just hate me. People generally don't hate each other. They just see the world different and they don't have the relationship. So you go through this at their best protocol, and then there's core stories and really understanding who people are. And sometimes you got to have these really deep conversations to understand what makes each other tick. So I've had boards where I've seen board members over the years, it's challenging. But it always comes down to the relationships and knowing what the real job is. And that's where that clarity comes in on what are we trying to achieve. And unless you know and understand each other, you never get over that hurdle. And there is a second step to that, at the best, that I'm going to keep as my trick. But it's these strategies, doing it on a regular basis, that allow people to get to a point where they're listening to each other. And that's usually what happens. They're in immediate judgment mode if they're not seeing eye to eye. And they have to listen and listen through the noise and listen for the pattern and the core reason. And everybody at this table is here because they care about the kids in Michigan. And when you get reminded over and over that there's decisions we all make that in isolation always look awful. But when you understand context, you're like, okay, I see principle to why that happened. And it's building a team. I've coached for over 20 years. You're always building teams. It's no different when you're working with a board. You're always building a team. And teammates don't get along sometimes, but they learn to work together. I don't know if I answered your whole question.
You did.
Okay.
turn on the mic so I can be heard. Having reviewed our strategic plan, please share what you believe are the top 3 priorities and tell us how you will energize both internal and external stakeholders to achieve them. And are there other priorities that we should consider if we decide to review or revise that current plan?
Okay. It's probably not going to give me the job. So systems are designed, they will do exactly what they were designed to do. And I have seen the strategic plan, and most strategic plans that you look at are incremental improvements to a system that's already failing a huge number of kids. And unless we completely change the system, moving from a seat time and seat time equals credit, seat time equals funding, to an engagement time, it doesn't matter what we do with a strategic plan, it's just gonna put perfume on a pig of a design. So what I would say is we need to spend some deep time deciding how much do we really wanna change the system? And if we do, what are the 2 tangible things that we can do to push it? And I keep outlining, I have done the research on districts around the country. I'm one of a handful of leaders that has ever turned around a district and then left and then did it again and then set up a statewide group to do it. What you'll find is the systems that have really changed and the key levers that will change the model to serve every kid should be in the strategic plan, and they should be. Every kid graduates on time, and we have a portrait of a graduate of what skills they be assessed. The second one should be that we measure engagement, student and staff engagement, and how are they engaged in their learning. The next step is we get the state school code changed so it doesn't say seat time, it says engagement time. And then we apply for 2 waivers. The first waiver on assessment is to do a NAEP-style sampling waiver or a sampling waiver where with state testing, there are questions on any test that if a kid gets this question right, they also get these other 3 right. We can make the test shorter by doing that, but then take ask for another waiver that allows us to start assessing transferable skills. So we start assessing communication, critical thinking, problem solving, etc. And we ask for the waivers. So now we put the lever on the system where instead of saying we're gonna measure you and make you sit kids in a seat, and we're gonna see how much you can do in reading and math, we have now said your job's to engage the kids, get them graduated with these skills that employers and everybody wants and parents want their kids to have. We get the federal waivers to leverage it. We change the way we do pupil accounting in the end because we move to an engagement time instead of a seat time. We then can leverage that we are now assessing transferable skills. And what we'll find is if we focus on those things, test scores will go up because the kids are engaged. So I would say the plan is a good start, but I think it needs a whole rewrite. The first problem is it's too complicated for districts. If you ask 550 of the superintendents in the state to list 3 items on that plan, there's probably about 7 of them that could do it. But if you ask them their job, if you're really clear, every kid graduates on time, and your job is to engage students and adults, they could do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, the next question is on self-reflection. How would you ultimately establish your credibility to be the leader in our state in public education?
I'm one of the old guys. I've been going, so we have state conferences every year. And now I will go to my 18th one in the fall, and there will be 100 new people. I already am the president of the Future Learning Council, where we have a network of 70 school district ISDs charters that we meet with regularly. And we have 100 people physically in the room. In the fall or in the spring, we have 200. I'm already a face a lot of the districts know. When I look at ISD superintendents, a lot of them have been around for a while. I have relationships all over the state. The text messages I have received when I was announced to interview, I'm getting them from the UP, I'm getting them from Northern Michigan, western part of Michigan, I'm getting them from Southeast Michigan. I have relationships. I think the biggest thing would be is how to connect with clarity. And not as we're telling you what to do, but we're setting expectations. And the expectations are the same for us. We have to engage everyone. And we already have a network that I continue to talk about, the Future Learning Council, that's already engaging. We have the doers already wanting to do the work. So I knocked out 500,000 of the kids in the state, so a third of them, through that network that they represent. We then bridge off of it because we have ISDs around the state that have set up their own sub-future learning groups. And we bridge into that network. We work with ISDs and we start bridging. And then there are tricks. And I mean, I've run the social media tricks. I've kind of moved away from it in the last few years because honestly, the kids keep changing platforms. And they're now on Instagram and then they're on TikTok and I can't keep up with them, but the parents keep changing too. But we utilize social media for some things and I've thought about how to connect and I got a couple tools that I really think would work statewide that are truly humbling and reflective. I mean, I've made a ton of mistakes. I've also been able to be fortunate to work with over the years. I used to do trainings for the Soups Academy for aspiring superintendents. So I have connections with people that they just knew me as this guy that was there doing this training and they reach out all the time. The Future Learning Council, I have connections all over the state with people. I have actual relationships and leveraging those relationships, but also being humble. I mean, anybody that you might be able to tell from now, I just am who I am. I'm really adamant that we're gonna help kids, but I'm just a downriver guy that ended up bouncing around a little bit in Southeast Michigan and really just wants kids to learn. And I want everybody to be successful. And I'm not into picking sides or beating people up, but I'm also gonna hold people accountable in conversations. And I don't have to put you on the spot, Nikki, but you're a parent in our district.
I am.
I get along with everybody,
Yeah,
sort of, mostly,
mostly, and mostly
Yeah.
is a good thing.
even when they completely disagree.
It's how you disagree.
Yes.
Okay, and then the final question, I guess, before we get some other follow-ups, but as far as preparation, please share with us your experience in dealing with the IDEA federal legislation as it relates to requirements that are mandated, not only for the state, but also for ISDs, RESAs, and local districts. Please share with us how you would work with parents, students, administrators, and staff as challenges arise with interpretation and implementation of federal and state requirements. And additionally, please share any examples you have regarding controversial interpretations regarding students with disabilities that you have been able to assist in solving.
Okay. So I've been, again, it's a long time, a couple decades. At one point, I remember working with Tim Wahlberg to be able to get us on maintenance of effort. There was an issue after the first stimulus back during the Obama administration with maintenance of effort for IDEA. We had to get some flexibility there. I've had multiple principals on the statewide committees to work on the MARS rules, et cetera. Over the years, I worked with advocates. I still remember in my third or fourth year as a superintendent, we might have had a complaint. And then we showed, it was a disproportionality complaint on suspensions, but we had already been tracking data and every month had been tracked data with every building on suspensions and every subgroup of kids. And I remember those times and we had moved at that time, I think the system had changed from a like ability versus achievement to the response to intervention system. And working through trying to help buildings make that shift and leaders make that shift. So a lot of the work from the department ends up being funneled through the ISDs. And the federal interpretations evolve and it's hard to move a system, bless you. But it still comes down to a culture that what happens too often in special ed is we get so tied up on paperwork and following these steps and then we don't own up that we're not getting kids graduated. And we need to make sure that they get back into general ed. And it's that philosophy and hammering it. So I've worked with groups and you have specialists in the department on this area, but it's really that culture shift that every district just wants to help their kids. And I've worked with parents that were mad and they were upset with what we've done or not done. And when you start to really work with them, you understand where the gaps are. And it really comes down to the relationships. And I see in our districts, we have leaders and teachers and principals and superintendents and boards that they care about kids. But what happens is as soon as you get to that point of a rule change or a complaint, everybody puts up like, okay, it's a fight, when it's really a problem-solving mechanism. It's a problem-solving mechanism that forces people at the table. I love mediation to sort through problems. The Ann Arbor Dispute Resolution Center is unbelievable. We do dispute resolution all the time. And there are methods to not have to fight because we're all there for the same reason. And nobody went into education to do something that would hurt a kid. They went into it because they care about kids. So when you look at the changes in laws, and it's really hard to follow that landscape because it changes quick, and you have to think through how systems work and where the levers are. And that's where I keep hammering. It's about student engagement and every kid graduating on time. Because that forces, when you get into that is the what we want for every kid. When you get into the how, which is where the IDEA legislation and implementation happens, it forces you to understand what you're trying to make happen. So how to get there, you design the how to get to that outcome.
I'd like to ask a follow-up question.
Um,
My
um,
iPad was dying, so
yeah.
give me a second.
If we can just try to stick to the questions.
Sure.
Okay.
I do have to give a little bit of historical context from Michigan.gov.
Okay, if you can cite the reference?
Yes, I can. It's Michigan.gov. It's from Executive Order 1996-12, and it is rooted in John Engler's executive order, which transferred many administrative powers from the State Board of Education to the Superintendent of Public Instruction through a process of Type 2 transfer. Okay, so just a little bit of historical context. The executive order removed authority from the State Board of Education in administrative functions. The order transferred dozens of specific administrative statutory powers in special education administration. It also transferred rulemaking authority specifically in special education and administrative rules for special education. So you've been doing this for a long time, you know. In 18 years, the federal government gives each state the right to make their own rules. So MARS rules, Michigan's administrative rules for special education, at that time then were transferred away from the State Board of Education to the superintendent. So now we stand one of, you know, the only state in the nation in 27 years is going to be investigated for special education compensatory services during COVID not being provided accordingly. There were a number of different guidances that were sent out to, you know, local school districts. It made it confusing. It wasn't, you know, a uniform guidance that was helpful. There are a number of complaints that have turned into that investigation and kind of put a spotlight on Michigan that says what's going on there. That is still ongoing. One of the things we all have talked about at the board is that we all care about special education and improving it. The question I have in relationship to that is, would you commit to helping to return the approval of MARS rules to the State Board of Education?
Tough question because I don't know enough to know what I know. We talk about being humble. I know where I am strong.
Mm-hmm.
I would need to learn a lot and have a ton of conversations. One challenge I see that I think we all have to navigate is that over the years, the department, who is filled with great, talented people, continues to get shrunk. And you have to have enough people to do the work. So and when I look at one of the challenges I really see and I feel every day when I'm leading a district is that we have no one vision of education in the state. We have multiple entities with different visions, and it's kind of disjointed, and the system has never been in more need of some significant change. And maybe that's one of the changes, maybe it's not. But what I know is something has to change. And I don't know enough to know if that's the thing.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, could I follow up on that? Well, I mean, as I understand it, the way it would work is if you're state superintendent, you write the rules on MARS. Now, you are our employee, so even though Engler transferred our authority to you, you have the authority, you could say, look, I'm not going to approve MARS rules unless this board looks at it and agrees. And we'll go back and look at other MARS rules as well, as the board would like. So you're basically still retaining that authority, but saying, as as my employer, I'll make sure that you all are happy with it as well. That's how I see it, and so
Not how the.
that wouldn't be how it.
Yeah, that's not how it would work,
Doesn't work
and
that way.
he's already said he doesn't have enough information to even
Administrative role.
formulate a
You
good
gotta follow the.
Earlier that there were ISD.
And I mean,
out there, bro.
yeah, it really is about how you work with teams and get constituents involved. And what I understand when the MARS rules are created, it is a long process that involves different constituents from across the state. And the last leg of that process, I don't know enough about what would make sense or not. But I would never want to sit in an office and make decisions alone.
Yes, and for those listening, I think we're putting information out that's not necessarily validated. Even one of the statements that you made previously, I think Board Member Snyder said that that wasn't necessarily correct. So I just want to be clear on that. Is that we need to be careful how we're putting information out for candidates to answer. I'll say that repeatedly. I think that we're ready to part.
Could we ask a few, I mean, we got time, could we ask a few follow-up questions? or-
Yes, please try to make
Or,
them
yeah, just,
questions and
and this relates
that are
to,
related.
yeah,
yes.
this is related to the one that, on test scores, success beyond test scores, high-stakes testing. What do you think about high-stakes testing, and, what will you advocate if you were the state superintendent regarding high-stakes? We as a board, even Republicans and Democrats, have said we oppose high-stakes testing, and we were glad with what they did recently with third grade, with teacher evaluations and we kept A to F off of the system way back when. So just curious, what you think about high-stakes
Yeah,
testing.
I would love to talk about that.
Was that? Was that?
I'm,
Love to talk about it.
he said he'd love to talk about it, but I would just like to interject that we're asking questions that we didn't ask previous candidates, so they don't have a chance to answer in the manner that you did, and to keep things fair, I would like to, even though we have extra time, if we've completed the interview, I would make a motion that we just move to concluding.
We can do that. I mean, if it's something that Dr. Timmis said that struck that made you ask that question, that's specific to him. Otherwise, just asking questions liberally and adding them as add-on questions, we're not doing. So
Do you want me to answer or no?
if is it in follow-up to a question
Uh,
or a response that he gave, Tom?
It was in response to
It's a hallway question.
the whole child success question. How do you define success beyond test scores?
And I would say that our kids and our parents have very little interest in the high-stake test anymore. The system needs some measures. That's where I said I would recommend applying for a waiver to be able to do either a NAEP-style sampling or item sampling, so we get some checks, but we remove some of we end up, and then along with that waiver, a waiver that allows us to start assessing transferable skills, which is what really matters. And I look at some of the testing, like the high school work keys, the kids don't care. Yeah, I've worked in enough schools, they don't care. And they fill it out. The SAT, they work that day. But it's also, you have so many schools are test optional, and we have kids that they blow the lid off of test scores, but we still have to work with them on how you can be resilient and overcome adversity, and how you can communicate, et cetera. We don't have measures right now to measure what matters for a student's success, but the Carnegie Foundation just announced they're working with schools to create that model to measure competencies, and they created the entire measure with seat time. And they've said move away. And they're helping create these models, and they have plenty of money to help fund to create it. The technology's almost there, and we'll be able to assess transferable skills, which is what really matters.
Thank you, Dr. Timmis, for everything that you do for children and for interviewing today and applying. And HYA will be following up with you and letting you know the direction that they're going in.
All right.
We're going in, I should say.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, and I can't thank you enough for your service. And I hope we can continue the conversation next week, because if you really want to transform the schools, I would love to be a team along with you to make that happen.
Thank you, Dr. Timms.
Thank you.
And Ms. Evans is going to let us know. I believe that there is one individual. Okay.
On the call in?
Oh, you're back. Yes.
Yes, there are people who have registered to provide public comment today, and I will review the rules. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes to address the board, and I will keep track of time. We will be strictly following the time limit so that everyone has an opportunity to speak. Please finish your sentence and end your comment when the timer goes off. Thank you for your participation. It is the practice of the board not to respond to comments during the public participation portion of the meeting. We will maintain an atmosphere of respect for all people. Any person disrespecting anyone by name or otherwise will be asked to cease. Public participation will occur in person and virtually, and we will begin with those persons that are physically in the room with us today, and then move to the queue online. There are no persons in the room at this time, and if you'll give me just 1 second to get the timer set up, we'll go to the caller online. Okay. We're coming, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Take your time.
There's one person registered, but they haven't called in. So it's-
So,
We're like 8 minutes.
so because it's a little bit early, should we?
Take a break. Come back in 8 minutes, or do you want to? Yeah, we can take an 8-minute break.
Okay.
We have a quorum of the board here, so the next agenda item is public participation.
So I've already read the rules. The member of the public who has registered for public participation is intending to call in. So I hope that she will be in the Teams meeting momentarily.
It's 5:01, so we'll wait until 5:03.
Okay. She's sending a text message back. She's calling in right now, she says. Very good.
Hello.
Hello, caller, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Very
This is
good.
Margaret Lincoln.
Very good. Whenever you're ready, you may begin your 3 minutes of public comment.
Okay, very good. Good afternoon. I'm Dr. Margaret Lincoln, retired school librarian with 50 years of service in Michigan public education. I'm proud to have spent my entire career with the Lakeview District in Battle Creek. As a Battle Creek resident, I appreciate the chance to provide some background on the outstanding tenure of John Severson as Harbor Creek Superintendent and to share some personal reflections on this truly upstanding, dedicated, and caring individual. My husband, Gary Lincoln, was a Harbor Creek School Board member during Dr. Severson's service to the district and stayed in touch in subsequent years. When Gary died, whenever you're ready, you may begin your 3 minutes of public comment.
If you can mute the YouTube in the back, because there's a delay. Yep, there you go. Click mute on the feed. Go ahead,
Gosh,
Dr. Lincoln,
I'm
if you can hear
sorry.
us. It's okay.
I can, but I'm hearing, all right, I'm gonna, as you say, I will mute the feed.
Perfect.
Just kind of continue where I left off?
Very good. That sounds great.
Yeah, okay, all right. Sorry for the technical glitches.
That's okay.
My husband, Gary Lincoln, was a Harper Creek School Board member during Dr. Severson's service to the district and stayed in touch in subsequent years. When Gary died this past March 2025, it was John Severson who was among the first to offer words of genuine condolence. In May of 2011, the Art Center of Battle Creek hosted the traveling exhibition Hateful Things, Remember the from the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Imagery at Ferris State. Student groups from Battle Creek area schools were scheduled to visit the exhibit in organized tour groups guided by trained docents. A screening of the film, Remember the Titans, celebrating Coach Herman Boone and starring Denzel Washington, was to have been viewed at one of the area high schools, along with an in-person address by Coach Boone. Sadly, the event was canceled by school administration. However, Harper Creek Superintendent John Severson, with approval from the Harper Creek School Board, made available the facility of Harper Creek High School auditorium for the film viewing. Superintendent Severson also supported Harper Creek students in attending the guided tours of Hateful Things at the Art Center, whereas two other school districts chose not to have their students view the exhibit. I am providing for board members documenting articles about the project Remembrance and Celebration of Race and Diversity in Battle Creek, which John Severson fully supported. Now, I can't.
Thank you for your public comment today, ma'am.
Right. And what I want to do is to give you a open URL with those newspaper articles.
Thank you, ma'am.
That URL is
Yes, ma'am.
tinyurl.com.
Thank you for providing your public comment today. Your 3 minutes is expired.
J. Severson comments.
Thank you, ma'am. Mike, are there any other callers today for public comment?
There are no other callers.
Thank you so much. This concludes public comment.
Thank you, Liz. Are there any board members who would like to provide comment today? Okay, seeing none, the time is now 5:09, and this special meeting of the State Board of Education is now adjourned. We will reconvene tomorrow at 9:30 a.m. Thank you.